Yo, everybody, it's your boy Nate Dogg. Have not done a video talking about the state of StarCraft 2 in quite a while, but I figured, hey, they put out another update today. Nobody, nobody's going to judge me anymore for what I say about the game, so we might as well talk about it a little bit. I thought this was interesting. If you're familiar with any of my work over the current year, then you're aware that I've been a very strong proponent of Protoss needing some help. If you remember back in January 2023, we saw huge buffs to Terran and Zerg with colossal nerfs to Protoss, and since then we've really hardly been able to see them perform this year. So when I heard that there was going to be a patch, to me personally, it seemed like the goal should be shifting some power from that early game that people complain about with Protoss into their mid and late game, so that pros could have more competitive strategies, more viability, or a wider range of builds that they can use. And instead we got this. So I'd kind of like to start the discussion with truly focusing in on what the goals are. So this was written by the balance cabal, whatever you want to call them, the Zerg conglomerate, what have you, and posted on SC Reddit, Twitter, etc. this morning. This today being the 22nd of August. So they say they want to make Protoss more stable on a professional level in the early game versus Ravens, and make them able to fight Terran mid-game armies more. Now, to me, this is a twofold issue that plays on, of course, the fact that maps have these really far-out third bases that are very difficult to secure, which naturally will always make Protoss, the odd man out. I don't think it's any surprise that on the biggest map pool we've ever had, Protoss players have been getting pulled between their bases. So we'll keep our eyes on that. Increase the variety in the mid-game and late-game army compositions by reducing the strength of masked ghosts, banelings, and disruptors. Now, to me, this language reads like they want to try and pull some strength from the current late-game units, maybe tune them down a little, and move that strength into other late-game units so that you have different options. So, this change reads like you'd be expecting maybe if they don't want disruptors to be used as much, maybe some help for Archons getting a little stronger as a tier 3 fighter, or I know that they didn't really want to buff the Colossus, but it gives me the impression that we're going to have power moved from these units into other units. Make over-specialized units viable throughout more stages of the game. I think it's hilarious that the Infestor gets put in the same bracket as Cyclones and Mothership, two units that mostly exist as the butt of jokes. But okay, for the sake of fairness, we'll go with that. Bring more visual clarity to important units on the minimap, as well as relevant abilities like Widowmine targeting. I don't know why we focus on the Widowmine targeting when we could make it so it doesn't kill 40 workers in one shot. I don't know why that's our focus, but okay. Promote more interaction in late game scenarios by making units such as Tempest, Mothership, and Broodlord more maneuverable. Now, to me, this is probably one of the worst directions ever, just because we've already gone down that road. We know that super fast Broodlords are not fun to play against, or super fast Tempests are not fun to play against. We know this because really long-range units that can attack from cliffs mostly just promote very unfun game states for a lot of people, and you get weird stuff. I mean, it's the same reason why ranged liberators have every single map designed around stopping them from sieging up on bases. But I don't know that those are the units we need to move power into, but let's just take a look at the changes. So the Cyclone in general, they've lobotomized it. If you guys remember, one time they brought it in for electroshock therapy, and it lost its ability to do damage to air units. We're looking at a kind of similar change. So this looks like some guy tried to copy a mech unit from another RTS that isn't StarCraft and just threw a bunch of numbers at it. My impression is that would be a lower range Cyclone that is constantly locked on, except there is no real benefit to locking on other than a 3 range increase, it looks like, from the regular auto attack. These Cyclones would no longer be able to really damage and take down buildings. You wouldn't be able to shut down cannon rushes outside your base. You'd never be able to hit Void Rays flying away from the edge of your base again. As somebody, one of the only people that builds a non-zero number of Cyclones, and I build a lot of Cyclones every day, this doesn't really address anything about what makes Cyclones bad. Just so you guys know, at their current cost of 150, 100, and their health of 120, they have some of the highest costs per health point of any unit in the game. This change would not really change that, so it doesn't change the risk of moving them out on the map. So I don't really see what the entire point of this was. I feel like There are definitely some other units that need love more than the Cyclone, and the Cyclone kind of holds a nice place as a niche anti-cheese unit, which I think you're probably not holding a lot of those one base builds with Cyclones anymore. So I don't really know about that. I'm not sure anybody was complaining about the Cyclone all that much, except people who don't scout against me. But that's whatever. So this is what I really like: the Ghost snipe damage reduced from 170 to 130. So it's still going to do bonus versus Psionic because they want you to be able to kill High Templar, I guess, and I guess Queens are Psionic, so you can still get them down to 5 health. EMP radius reduced. Now, this is great. I mean, the Ghost is one of the biggest problems in the entire game. It does way too much damage, and its primary damage dealing ability is interruptible. So the biggest problem with the Ghost is that it has essentially cannibalized the entirety of Terran late game strength. Everything revolves around the Ghost. And because the Ghost can't do anything if it gets damaged, you kind of need to keep walls in front of it. And the more ghosts you have, the less supply you can have to make your wall out of an army, right? So then it becomes planetaries, eBays, bunkers, turrets, and all of that. If you guys want Terrans to stop turtling with ghosts, you have to move the strength from this unit into something else. So what I would really love is for this snipe damage, maybe even bring it down further. The EMP radius reduction is great, but what they really need to do is take this power and put it into a unit that can leave your base. Because that's really, I think, the biggest stale thing with TVZ. I don't really feel, I'm not sure why whoever's writing this is talking about sniping zealots and roaches. I don't know if they're a YouTuber, but that's not really a thing that happens. I'm sure they've seen Pro StarCraft before. Widow Mine Drilling Claws makes the mine unburrow twice as fast. Targeting line is more visible. Just reduce the damage. Just reduce the splash. Why are we twisting our titties over this, guys? Come on. The one shot end the game at 3 minutes. I thought we wanted to move away from that. Medevac, replacing the speed upgrade with an energy regen upgrade. Now, this is probably the biggest buff that Terran would have gotten in a tremendous amount of time. The amount of pro games where you can see energy-less medevacs hovering over bio, we haven't actually had a straight-up buff to the Marine Medevac Marauder combination almost ever, right? The unit stats are the same that they've been since 2010, except the medevac. So getting another buff for the medevac, to me, is fantastic. You just, there's not a lot of reasons why anybody that's experimenting or wants to have a variety of strategies, there's not much you can really do with bio because it's been the same thing forever. So to me, it's like, okay, medevac speed for the bigger maps was maybe really nice, but now you won't have to send your medevacs home as often since they'll have infinite energy, I guess. I wonder if that stays on the fusion core. I don't know. And apparently their mini-map radius. So what they've done with the mini-map is tried to make it so that all drop-type units look the same on the mini-map so that it's not, it doesn't look like a small unit like a Phoenix. So if a drop is going to come into your base, it should look a little more pronounced than a Banshee flying in or a Phoenix. So I believe that that's the intention of this upgrade, which to me is great. Standardizing stuff should be awesome. And a part of the reason why that's an issue at all is because all the maps are huge now, just to be clear. Whatever. Interference Matrix now requires an upgrade. To me, this is dumb. I don't understand why we haven't just raised the energy cost of Interference Matrix. It doesn't really make sense to me that this upgrade is just for me personally, if I wanted to be biased, it's a huge buff. Because if I battlecruiser rush somebody who makes a Raven and doesn't get this upgrade, they did. So just to be clear, this is a huge buff for me specifically because I don't spam Interference Matrix on everything. But why not just make it cost more? Why not just make the ability cost more so that one Raven can't shut down a Colossus for 24 seconds straight? That to me, that kind of seemed like the obvious answer, but I get, they don't want you to research Cloak while you're making a Raven or something. It feels like, I don't know. It's a very weird change. Very weird change. Big buff for Nathan and TVT though. Now, the changes to Zerg. So, based on what we saw from Terran, we would expect some Tier 3 units to lose some power. We'd expect a redesign of an otherwise kind of niche mid or early game unit. And we would expect, some kind of nerf to their ability to do lots of damage quickly, right? Assuming that we're kind of following the pacing. We're trying to see what, how fair is this going to be across the board? Are we making a good faith attempt to improve the game for everybody and not just, small individual groups? So the Lurker loses the move speed bonus that it gets from Adaptive Talons. Adaptive Talons is the upgrade that lets Lurkers burrow instantly. Now, just to be clear, I was not even aware that they actually got a huge move speed bonus from that upgrade. So that's kind of crazy to me, because it's one of the best upgrades in the entire game. It's basically stim for Lurkers. Now, what's also interesting is that they're shifting the power out of this upgrade, but they're also making it cheaper. So this is, to me, this is a net zero. This is one of the most important upgrades in the game for Zerg. And the move speed, when they have creep everywhere and Nidus and dropper lords, is not really a factor. It's more about the burrow, more about getting the burrow speed than anything else. So this to me is just, you know, it's a little easier to get the burrow upgrade now, is basically what that change is. Infestor, they get rid of pathogen glands. So now infestors will spawn with the ability to fungal instantly. So if your opponent is building infestors and you're in their base and they spawn, they will be able to fungal you. So that's really what the big change is here. And as they said, that the infestor has no utility until reaching 75 energy, because the infested Terran ability was removed. So somebody out there is really salty, I guess, that infestors are useless when they don't have enough energy to use their abilities. I'm not even sure that this justification even deserves a response. If that's the only argument, then I'd really love to know who wrote these. Spire, yeah, they're making air upgrades cheaper. They're doing that for Protoss as well. I think they're just jelly that Terran air upgrades are cheap. Now, see, to me, this is the kind of normalizing that makes sense, right? This is on the line with, like, make depots take the same build time as overlords and pylons. Viper, consume damage reduced, reduces the attention required for gathering Viper energy. Are we really concerned about Zerg players' attention? 50 health? Really, guys? The most powerful spellcaster in the game now? Really? It needed an attention buff? Okay, whoever wrote this one, I'd like you to smoke me out. Thank you. That seems like it'd be a good time. Broodlord. So we're going to raise the Broodlord's movement speed by a rather huge amount. We're going... I don't know. There's some stuff here about broodlings. I'm not sure any of that means anything. I'm pretty sure this text just exists to get you to ignore the move speed increase. Guys, we've already done this. Clearly, they don't want people to use Thors to be able to run down Broodlords, I guess. I still don't really understand why Broodlord speed and Tempest speed have suddenly become such a huge thing. But... Yeah, this isn't it, Chief. This isn't it. So we've got a buff to Broodlords, a buff to Lurkers. Seems very strange. And somehow they want to try and break the game. I'm sure there won't be any bugs caused by making a second Broodling inside the mod. I'm sure. So then we want Overlords to be able to stop on a dime and instantly start generating creep to allow for more active usage of Queen drops. Yeah, guys, because Zerg is the one that is running out of builds here, right? I'm sure... I feel like I'm looking at this patch and all I can think of is now Protoss players that are struggling can get Queen dropped more. I guess. It's kind of weird. Let's see. I'm looking for the nerfs here. Move speed increased for Overlords. Okay. And move speed with the upgrade. Wow, so Overlords are just going to be a shit ton faster now. That's yeah, fascinating. Should not increase the overall strength of Baneling harass. No, now every other harass is a million times easier. Thank you. So Ultralisks are getting a cost reduction. So now Ultras are cheaper. And they burrow faster. Now they burrow twice as fast. Ultralisks can burrow almost twice as fast now, and they're cheaper. That's a huge buff. Hydralisk speed and range upgrades are combined. So now they only have one upgrade to get everything for Hydras. Well, that's a massive buff for Hydralisks. So far, it's just been nothing but buffs for Zerg. And then you look at Banelings. And I know that they said, so with +2 attack, Banelings will no longer one-shot probes or drones. With +3 attack, I'm going to assume that... Yeah, I'm going to assume with +3 attack, maybe they'll still one-shot probes, but I guess. We've only had 7 patches to stop mass Baneling from being a problem. So... really, the most interesting thing here, and this is probably the single biggest nerf Zerg has had in, I don't know, maybe ever, is the centrifugal hooks health bonus being removed. So Baneling speed gave 5 health to Banes, and the fall-off damage of planetaries goes from 40 damage to the primary target to 30 damage to secondary targets. Now, because of this, Banelings, after that buff to Bane speed, one of the reasons why Banelings have been able to smash planetaries down as effectively as they do is mostly because that extra 5 health makes it so that when the planetary shoots the Banelings, there's a lot of them with like 3 or 4 health left, basically, that then reach the planetary. So this is actually a huge buff in terms of dealing with Baneling run-bys for Terran and Protoss. So I will say it's a pretty decent nerf to the Baneling, but otherwise, it seems every late-game option that Zerg has just got a lot better. And several of their cheese builds with the massive Overlord buffs, but anyway, the big point, I think, here has been Protoss, right? We need to help Protoss. We need to give Protoss a little more oomph. We need to make it easier for them to take that third base, especially on these giant spread out maps. And we need to make it easier for them to be able to do more than one strategy, right? We see that Protoss has really been irrelevant for years at the top level, with only 1 or 2 players basically occasionally making a poke to the top. And at this point, you could argue that their success has been lacking for so many years now that you could probably draw a couple of the retirements people point to as being motivated by all of that. So I think Protoss really needs some help. So let's see what we got here. Forge, they made the shield upgrade cheaper. Kind of feels like a coin flip. Cybernetic score, that's the same thing with the Spire, so that's the same buff Zerg. Same buff as Zerg. Warp Prism. Okay, so they're making it bigger on the mini-map like the Medevac. Disruptors are getting nerfed. Supply cost increased. Model scale reduced. Radius increased. So they wanted to make it easier to tell where the disruptors are, I think. So the models aren't all bunched up anymore. And they raised the supply. Why do you raise the supply cost? Do you guys think disruptors win games for Protoss? Where are these where are these games being played where disruptors I feel like the only time I ever see disruptors is them getting abducted, and thankfully Zerg will need less attention cost. Is that, how did they write it? How was that written? Something reduces the attention required to abduct disruptors. There we go. Void Ray prismatic alignment. So previously there was an issue or something. I don't know. This was in like the test mod for Gamers 8. They made it so that the Void Ray doesn't get slowed down as much if you research the speed upgrade and then use the microwave ability. So this is a great buff for all the proxy Void Ray players that like to get the speed upgrade, I guess. I don't know. I don't know who researches that. Tempest, acceleration, deceleration, doubled. So if you guys remember the Ferrari Tempest, congratulations. If you didn't enjoy that metagame, then it's time for you to finally uninstall. So this looks like the only real serious buff to Protoss here. Aside from this, we have another unit lobotomy. The mothership getting some sort of colossal nerfs across the board. Really, the only buff to the mothership in here, aside from the cost being a little cheaper and the supply, is that it can follow your army more quickly. It doesn't have the same kind of air lag when it moves. But yeah, I guess in a world where Protoss players are so desperate and hopeless that they're going to build motherships nonstop in a desperate attempt to try and win games, I guess at least it'll cost less now. But in a way, the reduced build time will allow them to actually funnel more resources, you know? Originally, you'd have to make a mothership, and then 79 seconds later, it dies, and you've spent 400. But now, after 79 seconds, it'll die, and you can spend another 250. So within the build time of the original, you can actually spend more money. So you could spend 500 in the same amount of time. Fascinating to think about. And the cloak field is no longer passive. So to me, this is a huge nerf. The mothership, primarily, its greatest strength was that it had enough energy to use 2 recalls and you could leave it at home. But now it can't do that. So I don't know where that strength has been shifted into. Guardian Shield lasts 2 seconds longer. Yeah, it feels on the level with the Sensor Tower nerf. Stasis Ward sight range increase. This is like when they said buffing the observer size was a buff, I think. I think that's the same thing. And now barrier will also block the instance of damage which triggers the barrier. Now that's cool. Like if you Yamato an Immortal and it has the barrier up, it should be able to survive with full health and no shields. That is actually interesting design. I like that. But I don't know if that really, you know, does that help them push through lurkers more easily? I'm not sure. The thing is, all of the units you're fighting are still as good or better, right? So if you're Protoss, realistically, all you get from this is slightly faster Tempests. That's pretty much it. If you are Zerg, you're getting cheaper Ultralisks, better Ultralisk Burrow, more Viper energy. And if you're Terran, you get worse Ghosts and slightly better Medivacs. I'm not really crazy about this patch. I feel like it misses the mark because they haven't really addressed what they said the goals were in the top, you know? You have the Raven upgrade thing, but the problem is that upgrade is really cheap. And if somebody wanted to get it versus Protoss, they could. It's not like it's a one Raven timing that hits as soon as it's got 75 energy, guys. Without solely relying on disruptors, which is a unit that's not even considered problematic. Like Protoss don't beat Terran in playoffs of tournaments or Zerg. So how can you possibly argue that anything they have is too strong is mind-boggling to me. Like you just kind of have to, I think, be out of touch with the game. There's definitely nothing to increase the variety of mid and late game army compositions unless you do Overlord drops. Again, the Cyclone here is functionally just going to be worse than what is currently in the game. And this literally looks like it was pulled from a YouTube comment here. I hope they credit the guy that wrote that BattleNet post that inspired that update. But I also feel like there's nothing here that actually makes a Cyclone viable in the later stage of the game. There's nothing here that makes the Mothership more viable. They just made it easier to build, but it's just worse in every way. The Infestor is more viable. Now you don't need to research that really long upgrade that nobody wants to get anymore. I always knew as soon as Zerg players stopped researching pathogen glands every game, we would eventually see this upgrade removed, and I'm very satisfied that that has come to fruition. So really, if you're Zerg, you get new toys to play with. Your army units are a little better. If you play Terran, I don't know. You're still just A-moving Marines into people, hoping that you don't have to turtle on ghosts, but this doesn't solve anything about the ghost turtle problem. I think you could maybe just take this even further from 170. Instead of 170 to 130, I'd take it 170 down to like 50 and get rid of the cancel, right? If somebody wants to try and snipe your army in the middle of the map, you should dive on them and kill all the ghosts and get your value. Or, yeah, I don't know. Greatly reduce the damage of it, because right now, these changes don't really solve any actual problems with the game. I think some of the quality of life stuff with the unit size is nice, but I'm really struggling to understand how the changes in this patch help reach the goals that they talk about here. Because it just doesn't really seem to be the case. You know, you're still going to get abducted by a ton of Vipers if you're playing PvZ late game. So I don't know why you buff Vipers, right? Like, they're clearly one of the most problematic units that Zerg has. If you want to shift the power of the Viper into these other units, then I think it starts to make more sense. But it seems power was taken away from Protoss and not really put anywhere at all. So I'm interested to hear your guys' thoughts. I know that my standing in this community is not really a position that is of respect or anything anymore. You probably don't care too much about my thoughts on this, but I've noticed that pretty much nobody else anymore ever talks about Protoss players being left behind. So I don't really care too much for whatever Terrans like to get up to. But I do think that if you play Protoss, that your enjoyment of the game and your being a part of the community is just as important as everybody else's. So my biggest hope is that enough people will ask these questions, and that maybe we can get the Zerg Cabal to throw in a cheeky Protoss buff, or at least come up with some more creative ways to write their justifications for buffing themselves. I don't know. If you guys agreed, press the like button. If you don't, tell me you hate me in the comments. I love you. See you next time.